Gerri's going to pass out some envelopes for each of you. I would ask you, when you get it, not to open it, but to write your name on the front of the envelope.
It's an envelope. Just hang on to it, okay? Okay. Don't open it. Okay? Wait for further instructions.
Got enough teachers in this room. You should get this.
A surprise. Just for you. Write your name on the front.
Write your name on it.
Write your name on the front. Don't open it. Well, some of you are rebels. That's why I have to give special instructions. Do not open it yet.
Okay.
Everybody has one, right?
Did you know that Jesus never once said, "Worship me"? Not once. Never said, "Worship me." What Jesus always said was, "Follow me." Look at that. They were paying attention last week. Jesus always invited people to follow him. If you've ever taken a leadership class, or you've ever been in that position, what are two things leaders always do? They lead by example. The other thing leaders always do is they never ask people following them to not do what they are unwilling to do. Okay? They lead by example. So last week, we've been looking at the places in the red letters in the New Testament. Those are where Jesus' actual words, the red letters. And last week, we looked at the first time Jesus said, "Follow me." And that, of course, at least in the Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the so-called synoptic gospels, because they kind of all read the same. There's additions and stuff. But those three gospels, that's the first time Jesus says, "Follow me." And what he says is, "Follow me" to who? Fishermen, right? He calls his first four. He calls Simon, later called Peter, his brother Andrew, and he calls James and John, sons of Zebedee. We find out later in the Gospels that these four are actually partners. They are actually fishing partners, or family groups that fish together. Three of these four will become the inner circle for Jesus. When Jesus goes to the garden, when Jesus goes to the mountain to be transfigured. Peter, James, and John. If there's an inner circle for Jesus, it's those three. Not sure what happened to Andrew, but anyway. Those three. So Jesus calls those first four, and he says to them, "Follow me." That's what he says. They're out there fishing. And he says, "Follow me." And how do they react? They drop everything. Most Bibles say they immediately stopped what they were doing and followed Jesus. And they left behind everything. They left behind their families. They left behind their business. They didn't leave behind their vocation, not in the way you think, because what did Jesus say? "Follow me, I will make you fishers of men and women." Instead of, as we read in the message, bass and perch. Anyway, fishers of men and women. So they're still fishermen, but Jesus has turned and repurposed their lives. When they follow Jesus, their lives are repurposed. So let's move along in the gospel further. Jesus has been healing. Jesus has been teaching. Jesus has been feeding, sometimes in groups of 5,000 plus. Jesus has developed a reputation, and Jesus has developed a following. Jesus is the prophet du jour. He's got, what are we talking?
These are the Jesus groupies.
They're groupies, that's right. So there's this
Followers.
large entourage now. It's not just 12 guys following Jesus around along with the women. It's like a lot. You know, if he's preaching to 5,000, you can imagine how many are following him around. And that's where we pick up the story this morning.
It's from Luke 9, verses 57 through 62. On the road, someone asked if he could go along. "I'll go with you, wherever," he said. Jesus was curt. Thought Jesus was always nice.
Not the one I know.
Jesus was curt and said, "Are you ready to rough it?
Courteous.
We won't be staying in the nicest inns, you know." But he moved on and said to another, "Follow me." The other said, "Certainly, but first excuse me for a couple of days, please. I have to make arrangements for my father's funeral." Jesus refused. This isn't the nice Jesus again. Jesus refused. "First things first, your business is life, not death. And life is urgent. Announce God's kingdom." Then another said, "I'm ready to follow you, Master, but first excuse me while I get things straightened out at home." Jesus said, "No procrastination, no backward looks. You can't put God's kingdom off until tomorrow. Seize the day. No buts. I'd follow you, but my kids aren't quite out of school. But I'm not quite retired. But, you know, my mother, she lives 5 hours away and I have to tend to her. Or else, Jesus, I'd do it." This is the crowd Jesus is talking to. And the first man wants to be a part of the action. He's a Jesus groupie. He wants to get in on it. He wants to follow. And he says, "I'll do whatever it takes." It's kind of like junior high church camp on the last night. Have you ever been? There's altar call, right? Give your life to Jesus. You've been with this group for a week, day and night. You've learned about Jesus and you're ready to follow him no matter what. And so is everybody. And there are tears and songs and the emotions are high. And it's easy to get swept away. We'll all do it. If you're going to do it, I'm going to do it. In the disaster response world, we call that spontaneous, uninvited volunteers, SUVs. There's a disaster and I'm ready to help. So I'm going tomorrow. I don't know where I'll sleep and I don't know who will feed me and I don't know where I'm going to go to the bathroom and take a shower, but I'll be there. And that becomes the second disaster in a disaster situation. Bill's nodding his head. You have all these people show up with no provisions and nothing to do because we aren't organized yet. It's a disaster. So Jesus says, after he sees the shallowness in all of this, it's easy to get caught caught up in the emotion. Jesus says, count the cost. Think about it. I'm not promising you a rose garden. This is going to be tough. And we sort of do the church a disservice in the same vein when we say to people who we invite to be members, it's no big deal, it's just a formality. We don't say, coming to follow Jesus will change your life. When you join us, expect your life to change. Expect to be all in to follow Jesus. This isn't an emotional, groupie decision. Count the cost. Can you do it? Scholar N.T. Wright says, this is not this following Jesus, a triumphant march following God into mighty and powerful deeds. It is a commitment to Jesus, the one who goes into the world's deepest pain to be there with suffering people. Following Jesus means going into the world's deepest pain to be with suffering people. So when we think about following Jesus and the cost of discipleship, the question we need to think about is, when did you first learn about the cost of following Jesus? What does it cost you to follow Jesus?
So the first guy's a groupie. He wants to follow the rabbi du jour. Jesus keeps walking. Said to another, follow me. He said, certainly, but first, excuse me for a couple of days, please. I have to make arrangements for my father's funeral. Jesus refused. First things first, your business is life, not death. And life is urgent. Announce God's kingdom. Woo! A kinder, gentler Jesus. The older versions of the Bible just say, let the dead bury the dead. And everybody goes, how could you do that? Is that possible? The newer versions say, let the spiritually dead bury their own dead. Your business is life. William Barclay says, do it now or you won't do it. Okay, right? Do it now or you won't do it. Get out of this dead society now, or you never will. Do you sense the urgency? No excuses. Seize the day. Carpe diem. Because if you don't, you'll regret it. We call that the tragedy of the unseized moment. So another question for you to consider. What's your favorite excuse for not doing something? I don't have time. I don't have the talent. Some people don't even bother with that. They just say, it's not my thing. The one I hear most around here is, I'm too old. Okay. If you're not dead, you're not done. If you're not dead, you're not done. Moses spent 40 years as the prince of Egypt. Then he had to flee for his life. And he spent 40 more years tending some lousy sheep in the middle of the desert. Then 80 years old, he saw this bush. And he had a significant emotional event. And he heard God say, take your shoes off. I'm going to use you. And then he had another 40 years leading to the edge of the promised land, because God said, you're not going in there with me. You're coming to me now. 80 years old, he heard Jesus call. So what's your favorite excuse for not doing something? I tell you, it probably won't work with Jesus.
Luke's favorite theme is being obedient to the call of God and following Jesus. Verse 61, then another said, I'm ready to follow you, Lord. But first, excuse me while I get things straightened out at home. Jesus said, no procrastination. Are things ever straightened out at home? No backward looks. You can't put God's kingdom off until tomorrow. Seize the day. This is a little hard to see, but it's a rear view mirror versus a windshield. And it says, even though there are days I wish I could change some things that happened in the past, there's a reason that the rear view mirror is so small and the windshield is so big. Where you're headed is much more important than what you've left behind. Woulda, coulda, shoulda. Right? Only if I could've, woulda, or should've. So a good rule is to never look back unless you plan to go that way. What if you used one of those excuses? One of your favorite excuses. Jesus says, follow me, and you say, too busy. Jesus says, follow me, and you say, it's not really my thing. Jesus says, follow me, and you say, it's not my gift. Don't ask me to do that. I'm not comfortable. I'm not comfortable doing that. Jesus. Jesus wants no lukewarm followers. It's not an option. It's an invitation.
I want to tell you a true story about a guy named Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Dietrich was a German Lutheran. He was born in 1906, I think. He was educated in the U.S. College, seminary, the whole thing. He left the U.S., he got ordained as a Lutheran pastor, left the U.S. and went and pastored churches in England and in Germany. And then in 1938, you all know what was happening in Germany in 1938, right? Hitler on the rise, invasion of Poland was 39, I think. In 1938, Dietrich Bonhoeffer went back to the U.S. to do some more studying. He went back to safety in the United States. Then in, I would say 1942, he felt nudged by the Holy Spirit. And based on his writings, Chris Hall, something of an expert on Dietrich, said, did Christ force Bonhoeffer to return to Germany? No, Jesus simply issued an invitation. There is work for you to do here. Dietrich, I'm calling you home. I'm calling you to follow me. I'm asking for your hopes, your desires, your future. Well, Bonhoeffer knew what was going to happen. He was arrested in 1943 by the Gestapo for being part of the plot to kill Hitler. He was executed by hanging 71 years ago yesterday, April 9th, 1945, at the end of the Third Reich. Like Martin Luther King, Dietrich Bonhoeffer did a lot of writing in prison. And one of the things he wrote is, when Christ calls a man to follow, or woman, he beckons that person to come and die. If you're going to follow Jesus, you're going to die. When Christ calls a man to follow, he beckons him to come and die.
A grain of wheat does not fall to the ground and sprout unless it dies first, right? To die to yourself. So take your envelope. Read your name. And then go ahead and open it. Jesus doesn't force anyone. Jesus just invites. Amen.
Would you stand